1 and 7.2, I can use transformations to determine whether two figures are congruent. And I should have probably put congruent here instead of congruence, but congruence is two figures have congruence when they're the same size, same shape. So two figures have congruence if they are the same size and same shape. Okay, and then transformations is what we've done in the beginning of this whole chapter. So we have learned three transformations. We have learned reflections, we have learned rotations, and the first one we learned was translations. Okay, and I know these figures didn't show up super well, so we might have to just darken them a little bit with our pens. So the first one says determine if the two figures are congruent by using transformations. So are these two shapes, these two triangles, ABC and XYZ, are they the same shape, same size? If they are, I can turn one into the other one using only reflections, rotations, and translations. So if I reflect triangle ABC, I'm going to draw it. Do I have a marker? Okay, there's triangle ABC. I'm going to trace it on here. If I reflect it, so that would mean I flipped it, and then translate it down and to the left, it's exactly the same. So since I can use transformations to turn this one into this one, they are congruent. So I would say triangle ABC is congruent. This is a symbol for congruent. It's an equal sign with a squiggle on top, to triangle ZYX, because I can, when we say I can map triangle ABC onto triangle ZYX using, whoops, there shouldn't be an E, using a reflection and translation. Because we said if I reflected it and then translated it down into the left, it would be the same shape. Number 2, determine if the two figures are congruent using transformations. I'm going to darken this one because you can't really see it. It looked like this. So I'm going to trace the one with my marker the best I can. That's pretty close. Okay, let's see. First, let's try reflecting it. If I reflect it, it will not match up. They are not the same shape, so they are not congruent. No sets of reflections, rotation, and translations. We'll map this one onto this one. So the two figures are not congruent, and if we explain, I would say they're not congruent because they're not the same shape. Three says Ms. Martinez created the logo shown below. Which transformations did she use if the letter D is the pre-image, so D is the before, and the letter P is the image, so P is the after? Are the two figures congruent? This is one you're going to submit for your video. Are they congruent? Which transformations do we use to turn the D into the P? And then the last thing we need to talk about is congruence statements. So they will ask you sometimes to write congruent statements for two sets of congruent figures. And these symbols, the arcs in the corners and these little tick marks on the sides, those tell us which parts are congruent. The first part of the congruent statement here is already done for you. They said triangle ABC is congruent. They use that squiggly line on top of the equal sign again to triangle DEF. And the order that they wrote these triangles is super important. Do you see how there's one little arc on A and one little arc on D? That means angle A and angle D are congruent, so they'll both, if A is first, D has to be first. B and E are also congruent because they're both right angles, so if B is next, E has to be next. And since C is third and has the two arc marks, F has to be third because that also has two. So here we're going to list all the sets of congruent sides. And it is important to use the correct notation when we do this. So one of the sides on this triangle is side length AB. So we should have a line on top to show that it's a line segment. And then we'd say it's congruent to side DE. The order is super important. Since A has one arc and D has one arc, if A is first, D has to be first. That's saying that this side is congruent to this side. All right, now let's do side BC is congruent to, we have to say EF. And we have to go in that order because B has a 90-degree angle, C has the 2, E has 90, so it has to be first with B, and F has the 2 arcs. Okay, then the third one would be, you could say AC or CA. I'm going to say side CA is congruent to another side length. This is what I'm going to have you submit as your answer to the video. So obviously you can't do the line segment symbol on top. So you're just going to put in the letters that should go here. Which side is CA congruent to, and make sure you're careful of the order. The last thing we need to talk about is listing the sets of congruent angles. So angle A is congruent to angle D because they both have the one arc. Angle B is congruent to angle E, and again, notation is super important here with the angle symbol and the congruent symbol. And then angle C is congruent to angle F. If you are asked to list congruent statements for a problem on your homework, quiz, test, anything like that, you have to write one for the whole figure just like they already had down here for you. And then you have to do it for all the sets of congruent sides and all the sets of congruent angles. So you have to do it for all of these.